Hello and welcome to MEE Live. I'm your presenter, Tamar Hemani. Today is Thursday, September 25th, and we are following the news of a civilian aid mission aiming to end Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. Since first setting sail nearly a month ago, the global Sumud Flotilla, a 50-boat convoy whose stated aim is to break Israel's siege of Gaza, has been repeatedly attacked by the Israeli military. Those attacks have prompted the Italian and Spanish governments to send naval ships to ensure the safety of their citizens on board. The convoy is a non-violent grassroots movement joined by over 300 activists from around the world in an attempt to raise awareness about Israel's blockade of the Gaza Strip. That blockade has caused mass starvation in the Strip, resulting in what a UN-backed body has called a famine in Gaza City. At least 442 people have so far died as a direct result of that starvation. Several flotillas have attempted to make the journey to Gaza this year to break that blockade: the Conscience Flotilla in May, the Madeleine Flotilla in June, and the Handala Flotilla in July. Israel's military has responded either by using drones to strike those boats or by intercepting them and detaining everyone on board. But the sheer scale of this mission raises questions over how Israel's government may choose to respond this time. Activists aboard the flotilla are aware of the risks they may face. Israel's government has called them terrorists and vowed to stop them. Still, activists say they're forced to take action where their governments have failed to, hoping their home countries will protect them should Israel's military attempt to violently intercept them. So far, a series of non-lethal Israeli strikes on the flotilla has failed to provoke an international response. While anchored in Tunisia earlier this month, drones launched projectiles at the flotilla's lead ship, which had been flying under a Portuguese flag, causing a fire to break out on board. Despite public outrage, though, foreign governments, including the Portuguese government, did little in response. Then, late on Tuesday night, activists on board reported hearing explosions, seeing drones drop objects, and having their communications jammed in a series of attacks thought to last until the early hours of Wednesday morning. The vessels are currently sailing at slow speeds through Greek territorial waters, determined to continue to Gaza. Now, both the UN and the EU have said that no attacks, no drone strikes, no seizures, or any use of force would be acceptable. Some countries have backed up their words with action to protect their citizens on board. Italy dispatched 2 naval ships, and Spain followed by sending one of its own the next day. Yet others have refused to say whether they would protect their own nationals on board. In response to requests for support, the UK Foreign Office said the British government is not able to provide assistance at this time. MEE's Matilda Mallinson has been on board the flotilla, speaking to activists as they continue their mission to deliver aid to Gaza.
After intensive drone attacks in international waters on Tuesday night, Italy and Spain have decided to send Navy ships to help the global Sumud Flotilla proceed safely and lawfully through the high seas.
Por eso les informo de que mañana mismo zarpará desde Cartagena un buque de acción marítima equipado con todos los medios por si fuese necesario asistir a la flotilla y realizar algún rescate.
This has left other governments considering whether they will act to protect their citizens on board.
But those are not the only 2 countries that are discussing this possibility. And just one thing about that, the political side of it, just to give back to Mariana, there are many people concerned about us having military vessels around us. To be honest, that's something we always dreamt of having. We have no illusion that to make sure that we can go through to the blockade or anything like that, the support of the international community needs to be strong, and to have a military vessel is a way to be strong.
Among the 45 plus nationalities are 13 British citizens whose government has repeatedly declined to pledge any protection for their citizens.
The fact that nothing has been said, and I am so low in my expectation of anything being said or certainly all done to protect us in the flotilla, despite the fact that we're a peaceful humanitarian mission, doing things in compliance with the law, is very telling and I suppose very depressing. But
as a US citizen on this flotilla, do you think it's fair to say that one of the reasons the British government has been so slow to act in the protection of its citizens is to do with the USA?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, sadly, the US and Britain are the two largest proponents and the most complicit governments in this genocide. And the people, Keir Starmer and Donald Trump, and quite frankly also Joe Biden, are the reasons that we've seen this horrific genocide happen. And it's so depressing. And it really makes me wonder, thinking back hundreds of years ago, did we even need the Revolutionary War? Because we're basically we're a group. We're doing the same awful things that we've always done for centuries, and it's depressing.
Speaking to us from aboard the flotilla is MEE's reporter Matilda Mallinson, who has been in discussion with activists as they continue their mission to Gaza. Matilda, thank you so much for speaking to MEE Live today.
Good to see you again tomorrow.
So we've obviously heard reports of recent drone attacks on the flotilla earlier this week. Can you just describe what the situation has been like for us looking in from the outside?
Of course. So the first drone attacks actually occurred over a week ago, while two of the boats, including the boat I'm standing on, were harbored in Tunis. Since then, it's been quieter in terms of physical attacks. However, there's been a steady trickle of propaganda coming from Israel defining the flotilla as a terrorist operation with direct links to Hamas. These are false claims, but they were quite a clear indication of what came afterwards, which was late on Tuesday night and into the early hours of Wednesday. We had 5 hours of drone attacks across several boats on the flotilla. There were 14 attacks in total, 11 explosions, and on 3 instances, items were dropped by drones onto boats. These included chemical substances that harmed participants. And assessment the next day demonstrated the drones used in these attacks were specifically designed to damage sailing vessels. So the indication is that it was an attempt to render the vessels in this flotilla unseaworthy, and the risk to passengers' lives was definitely real. However, there were no casualties. There was 1 burn injury, and the flotilla intends to sail on.
So speaking of those risks to activists' lives, as you mentioned, they're alleging links to Hamas. There's been increased drone activity as your flotilla gets closer to its destination. What has the discussion been among the flotilla's leadership surrounding concerns that they may be detained, they may be charged with terrorism? What have those conversations looked like?
While the flotilla that we're looking at now does have different projections, different risk assessment to the 2 previous flotilla attempts that had quite a lot of media profile, the Madeleine ship, the Handala ship. The projections from the start have been that the risk is higher. And so in that respect, the conversation actually hasn't changed as much internally as it has changed externally. Before I even departed for Tunis, I saw a statement by Ben Gvir in Israel saying that, or proposing plans to treat the passengers of the flotilla under anti-terrorism law and to penalize them and detain them as such. He was advocating for a period of detention much longer than the couple of days of detention that the previous 2 flotilla operations experienced. However, it's one thing to anticipate danger and it's another thing to experience danger. And I would say that the attacks the other night certainly rattled people. They came with elements of clear psychological warfare. You know, before the devices were dropped, the communication system was interrupted with ABBA music. And several of the explosions were occurring in midair, creating an atmosphere of fear. Now that we're passing Crete, which is the last safe port we will pass, and the last opportunity for anyone to disembark, it appears possible that the intention of these attacks was to terrify some people to stepping out of the mission at the last possible moment. No one on this boat intends to do so. I'm on the lead boat, the boat called Family Gaza City. And on the whole, I think that while a small number of people may make this decision, their numbers will be replenished by the many, many people supporting this operation from the ground, and it will move forwards in just as strong a number, with just as strong a number as it has proceeded up to this point.
And Israel's approach obviously has not gone unresponded to. We've seen Spain and Italy recently send naval ships, which is quite a marked step up from sort of more verbal warnings or condemnations. What do you think motivated that decision? Is it intended to serve as a signal, as a caution of its own?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question because the first government to make this move was Italy. And to the two Italians that we have on board, this was very surprising. This is the first time any humanitarian aid mission to Gaza, because it's not the first of its kind, but the first time that there has been any kind of naval support. And given that the wider aim of this flotilla is to pressure governments to enforce international law when it comes to Israel's illegal behavior with the Gaza Strip, you know, the genocide and the naval blockade. Given that their wider goal is to put that pressure on governments, they certainly see it as a victory. However, I think that there is caution around how much positivity to feel by this decision, particularly from the Italian government, who has been inconsistent perhaps in its messaging on Israel. And so one suggestion has been, just a couple of days ago, there was a massive general strike across Italy. Hundreds of thousands, possibly 1 million people across a dozen cities of Italy took to the streets to demand firm government action on the question of Israel and Gaza. And so the timing is quite telling. It may be that grassroots pressure is simply working in Italy. As for Spain, Spain has been one of the pioneering nations when it comes to speaking out against Israeli impunity regarding the war in Gaza. And so I can tell you that when it was announced Spain would be sending a naval vessel, the reception from those on board was more positive than the news of the Italian vessel, because the intentions of Spain's government have been much more explicit and much more straightforward in terms of doing what they can to end the genocide.
Interesting. Yeah, Spain definitely has been, Spain's government at least, has been bolder in criticizing Israel's actions in Gaza and taking steps to punish the government for its policies. A more ambiguous position has been that of the UK. There's notably several UK citizens, including yourself, aboard this flotilla. And obviously we saw Prime Minister Starmer recently saying he'll recognize a Palestinian state. But as you yourself have noted, the British government has also said that it is not able to provide assistance at this moment to its own citizens on board. How do British nationals journeying with the flotilla feel about that statement? How have they reacted?
I think that British nationals wouldn't call the British government's response ambiguous, even the recognition of Palestinian statehood. It was remarked when we announced that news on the boat that this was 108 years later than the Balfour Declaration. My local MP, Labour's Bell Ribeiro Addy, asked Keir Starmer in Parliament weeks ago whether he would commit to protecting British citizens on board the global Sumud Flotilla, and Keir Starmer did not give any response to this question. That pressure is really piling on now. We've just had Zach Polanski, head of the Green Party, write a firm letter in defense of the citizens, and we're seeing a lot of popular support coming in. Because look, I'm on this flotilla not as an activist, as a journalist, as a reporter, covering a very, very significant global movement and a perfectly lawful global movement. So there shouldn't really be anything controversial about me being on board. Nevertheless, my life is in danger as much as any of the activists, or at least, partially the amount of some of the activists. The risks are different for different people. Nevertheless, my life appears to be at risk. Israel has made indiscriminate threats of violence against the passengers of this flotilla, and Israel has not demonstrated much respect for the protected status of journalists in conflict zones. And for that reason, I have personal concern about the government doing its duty to protect its citizens at sea. I can't really do my job if I'm constantly concerned about whether or not I'm going to be bombed at sea. And so I can tell you from that individual perspective that I don't feel particularly reassured by the stance of the British government, but I do feel reassured by the overwhelming waves of support we've had from the British public calling on the government to commit to protect British citizens on the flotilla. And really, the broader question there is actually about asking the government to enforce international law. That is the duty of states. Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, is a former human rights lawyer, and the violence that the flotilla has experienced, while it has not been claimed directly by Israel at this point, Israel has directly threatened the flotilla. Israeli officials have made calls that have also reached parliamentarians on these ships to that effect. That would just be yet another flagrant violation of international law. And so until our government, the British government, shows an absolute determination to enforce the law by protecting its citizens, it will not be enough.
Matilda Mallinson, thank you so much for speaking to MEE Live from aboard the global Sumud Flotilla. We hope the rest of your journey is safe and peaceful, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you and the others on board again soon.